All right, we are live. I'll give it like a minute or two to propagate through the interwebs, get people a chance to get on, see our lovely faces, and that sort of thing. So let's go ahead and just bullshit for like a couple of minutes.
Cool.
Down.
Travis, I'm glad for you that you joined us again. How's your week been, man? How's stuff going? How's work?
Work is going good. It was good to finally settle back into things after getting back. I'm back in the greater Washington area. You know, normally I'm in Fargo, but the work from home situation is giving me the opportunity to work while I'm at here for the next couple months. So enjoying that.
Nice.
Enjoying being back in this area. Yeah.
Oh, whereabouts?
Yeah.
I was in Fort Lewis for a while, so I was like the Tacoma area.
Washington D.C. Washington D.C.
Oh,
That said, I did have the chance to train up in Washington State at Sub Base Bangor, right next to Bremerton. So and while I was there, it was absolutely gorgeous.
So my daughter actually just signed into the base there. So she's a nuclear engineer.
Okay.
Nice.
So and she's been feeling the real estate pain because she's tried to buy a couple places and. Coming in solid offers, no drama, and just every time coming in 10 over, somebody comes in 20, 30 over. So it's just, and she's kind of, I'm not gonna say cheap, but she knows what shit's worth. So like, it's hard to get her to, go over. So it might be a while before she closes anything.
I imagine. Oh no! I was in Fargo, North Dakota. I'm with Microsoft. Our second largest campus is in North Dakota, though I have been at the main campus in Redmond. That was like the first stop I made when they flew me into, because the job hasn't had a reason to send me to the mothership yet. so I was like, well, I'm going to poke around and check this out while I'm here. So that was a blast. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, but you're in DC now. Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I worked very briefly, and there was a company in Alexandria, like the southern part of DC. But I was mostly in Baltimore working at Fort Meade.
Gotcha. All familiar places. I just passed by that the other day, just killing time at Anne Arundel Mills. So yeah, very familiar with that area. Yep.
Yeah, it's my old stomping ground right there. It's right up the road from on the 295 from Fort Meade.
Yep.
Good stuff. You've been. I saw. I was just gonna say I saw you eating good food on your Facebook post, man.
Oh yes. So my wife has been sort of experimenting with different kind of stuff, and she's basically perfected this like. So she's come up with a variation of blackened chicken, and it started out with just her figuring out what to do with some Peruvian dry rub that my mother-in-law gave us, and so. She was like, why don't we make a chicken sandwich out of this? And I was like, well, if we're going to do that, we need to do this right. So I went and got some brioche buns and some sandwich dough pickles. And then she had some sambal, and we mixed that with mayo to like come up with like an amazing chicken sandwich that doesn't know whether it's Hispanic or Asian, but it's amazing.
Sounds delicious.
Actually sounds really good.
Yes.
I'm starving. I'm like, can I DoorDash something? Like, that sounds amazing.
Yep.
For sure. Art, what about you, man? How have you been? How's your week going?
Market's still nuts. It's just nuts. So
yes.
It's nuts. On the obnoxious part of nuts, we're sending over just insane offers for people, and they're like, well, I don't know, in this market. And I'm like, hey, you know what? Fuck yourself. Like, honestly, take the absurd amount over asking and just, be blessed. Count yourself lucky that this is all working out great. So I think we're going to hit a part fairly soon, at least out here, where what does come on is going to be so high, it's actually just not going to go anywhere, which it eventually finds that equilibrium. But I think that we're past the crest of, merely elevated prices, and at some point it turns ridiculous. So I think we're about to hit ridiculous, and then we should hit a ceiling and then level off. I don't
So with
think it's crash.
so real estate. So question about that actually. So of the buyers that you're closing on, are they individuals, or have you been getting a lot of offers from say these large scale investors like Blackstone, or these large real estate firms, or really investor firms that have been swallowing up real estate pretty much everywhere?
So I have a mix of
Hmm.
smaller, and then let's say like larger local individuals, and then you have I have a Chinese firm or two where we deal with
Hmm.
their agents, and the kind of the bigger they are, the more absurd they are. So like the folks of the Chinese group, they have kind of very specific things they're looking for, but if you find
Hmm.
that for them, they don't care. They're just like, oh, well, how much is it going to cost? And we already, just to be safe, come in a little bit elevated, just to know that the sellers will take it, because we're looking at a lot of off-market stuff, because the actual on-market inventory is so it's sparse, and the good stuff goes so quickly. The stuff that's still floating around is just ignorantly priced. It's just, they're ridiculous. So we're hunting down people who are off-market, but if you find it for them and bring it, even if it's a pretty absurd price, the Chinese investors don't back off. They're just like, okay, well, here you go.
Hmm.
The kind of the mid-range guys who are local, people who are, let's say, building in the multi-million-dollar range, just for the dirt. Even those guys, they're coming in strong. Like, you find them something decent, and it's roughly what they're looking for. Like the normal, like, haggling process, and the kind of cat and mouse and all that. We're not really playing games now. Like, they just kind of want to find something to lock it down. And then any of the smaller guys are getting blown out. So, like, we have one couple who, I think I mentioned it, last week. It's like $1 million condo they're trying to buy, and everything that we go after, it goes up to $1.1 million, $1.2 million. It's just like it pops up and it just gets bid up and it's gone. And they're smart financial types, and they don't want to overpay for something. But they've also, after I think the 8th or 9th offer we wrote, that they just, for the first 7, we didn't get a counter, like just nothing. And then they came in really strong enough to get a counter that they weren't going to even look at. And if you're a smaller type of, like, a first home buyer, or somebody that's not coming in very, very strong, it just sucks. It just sucks. It really does.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure I lucked out because I bought my mortgage right before the pandemic happened. And then I also just refinanced. So
Yeah, you're lucky, because Austin is getting ridiculous right now, from what I hear.
I'm fairly certain the people that live right next door to me moved out because they were able to flip the house for like 200 over what they paid.
Yep.
So
yeah, 2 of my agents are actually, as they make money, are investing in Austin rather than here. And if you think about how elevated your Austin market is, like for California, like that's a cheaper market, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And it's, that's how nuts it is. It's off the rails. And like I said, the weird thing is, you don't really hear a lot of smart money talking about how it's going to crash. Like, people really think it's just going to keep going, then level off and just kind of grind to a halt, or not maybe not a halt, but like grind to a more normal rate of growth. There's really not this sense of an incoming crash, and it's just it's weird to feel that, because this feels like a bubble, except that, like, it kind of isn't. Like, it just
that's why I was asking about what kind of buyers were you mostly seeing, because Wall Street Journal and the Post have been reporting that a massive, pretty much a sizable chunk of who's snatching up the real estate are mostly investment firms like Blackstone, Morgan Stanley. They've decided that whatever losses that they had during the pandemic, a good way to recoup that is going into real estate and basically becoming landlords. And so there's like an upcoming fear that the worry is we're going to get to a point where the majority of the nation is renting, and the largest bank institutions are basically become national landlords, which in itself is kind of scary.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's not a great outcome at all. And they kind of have no reason not to, because they can come in high. And like the Chinese folks that we're working with do the same thing. They're looking at our market. If you go a little bit inland, that you see the big American institutional buyers. They're looking at different price point and they're trying to buy more rather than buy a few things that are more expensive. Like the Chinese money is trying to buy smaller numbers of things that are very high priced, whereas like the Blackstone guys are just trying to like scoop stuff up. They're just like taking it as much as they can get. And for them, it's a perfect bet because they can afford to risk it all. The worst case is that the market crashes and the U.S. government bails them out. And the best case is that everything goes up and they make a ton of money. So it's actually like the most perverse incentives you can imagine to structure something like this, because you have rents that are going up. People are spending more of their income on rents. They don't really have a choice because it's rent. You don't.
Yes.
You can't not do it. And it doesn't take much, it doesn't take much control of the market to control the market, if you know what I mean. Like when you're dealing with a ton of individual owners, none of us at our level can game the system. But if you can control 5 or 10% of the U.S. housing market, that's not that much to say it, but you actually can tilt the whole market. And that's what they're going to do, is that they're going to get enough of control of it and then that turns into 15. And once you're at like 20% or something, it just, you can basically take any amount of vacancies that are out there and game it. And that's all. They stand to lose nothing because they're too bigger to fail than the last too big to fail. So there's no way they don't get a bailout. It really, that just exposes how vulnerable our system is. And it's a scale that's never been seen before. And it's a tragedy, but it's going to take Congress to do something. And it seems like they have no idea what's going on.
They have no clue. It's like this whole, like, I hate to get conspiratorial minded, but the whole Great Reset thing was about owning less and leasing more, right? That's what the whole thing is.
Hold on. Please tell me that you believe in any way in the Great Reset.
I don't. I don't.
Okay. This is about to pop off. I was like, all right, here we go. Okay. But no,
you should know me better than that.
Talks about that stuff all the time about, this is all part of their plan and whatever. I mean, it's part of some people's plan, and to call it a conspiracy is probably true in that you do have some smart guys with a lot of money who are looking and go, hey, this is a really safe bet. Like, heads we win, tails we win. Like, there's really no downside to this. So why shouldn't they do this?
But you also got to look at it the fact of so millennials and Generation Z people are like not looking to own because they don't want to be tied down to a location, and with the whole way, like, not necessarily looking to own. I'm like, right away, like, so everybody's owning later in life, right? That's what I mean. So,
but that's because it's not feasible.
Well, it's not because most people that work in tech make enough money that they can buy a house, but they don't want to I'm talking about before the COVID shit show and everything else, rights going on now. I mean, in general, if you worked in tech, you made enough money that you could get a mortgage and be able to put down roots. But because of different incentives like remote work or how people are looking at doing the whole life progression thing. So it's no longer get married by 22 for a whole host of different reasons. I'm not saying that this is 100% choice, because people are there's student debt involved. There's the whole people having going through their whole family divorce thing and stuff like that to give a different incentive than what people 20 or 30 years ago did. But you're just now seeing that come. You're just now seeing, millennials are just now entering the home market pretty much. They're delayed because of the Great Recession, delayed because of where their priorities are, and delayed because of student debt. So
okay, but that's feasibility. That's not that that's a lifestyle thing. It's just because it's not super feasible.
But it's also part of the lifestyle thing though, because people wanted to be able to go out and travel and stuff. They were spending a lot of money on travel and things. I do think that part of what you're seeing now is that people were forced to stay indoors during COVID, and they were able to they were like, okay, I need more space now instead of what I was been doing. And since I can move anywhere I want when I'm remote working, I can go buy a house now. I do think that pushed some of this forward a little bit.
I think
that's essentially what I did.
I think for some that was the case, but I'm more in the art camp. For example, people that were in the SeaTac area and the SeaTac, LA, San Francisco area.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Those
people weren't buying houses simply because you can't. Yeah. What we we don't have the wherewithal to buy property in these areas, but we need to be located here. So we're just going to have to put up with the fact that, we live in a place where a 2-bedroom is, $3,500 to $4,000 a
For
month.
sure. No, that's 100% agree with that, especially in the overly priced markets like LA, New York, some places in Massachusetts. You're talking about the super expensive areas. Austin started to get it that way. It wasn't always that way. My house, full disclosure, I think it's valued at $300K when I bought it. So that's like, it's that's about double than what you would get for a house the same size in like Indiana. But then like 10 minutes down the road, you can get a double house for like half the price. So it's fucking weird.
It's interesting. So from Jared Marshall, don't forget the great wealth transfer. The irony is that there's going to be less of that happening this generation than the generation before it, and that's particularly the case for Blacks and people of color. Like, we still haven't seen the full ramifications of the foreclosure crisis that happened in 2007, 2008. So there's going to be an entire generation of people that probably would have inherited the houses of their parents or grandparents, but otherwise didn't because of the foreclosure crisis. It's one of the last sort of stable bastions to accumulate wealth in this country was to buy and own a home, and grow that asset. But it's becoming more and more difficult for the newer generation coming up to get a foothold in that, and that's why I was when you mentioned about the selling, I eventually, because I just got done listening to the channel Breaking Points talking about the current buying up of the real estate market and how that might impact an entire generation going forward.
Yeah, I mean, it was designed to be generational. I mean, and this is, a lot of the, logic behind redlining was, to keep certain zip codes and certain, price points locked into a slower rate of growth, and then others to see higher rates of growth. So, I mean, that's structural, institutional, and was from design. And even if you stop doing it overtly, you still set a lot of that in motion in the past that just naturally tends to carry on.
Yeah, so, credit score becomes the way you keep people out of.
Right, and even if even if you take out the more overt aspects of it, you've already shaped how Americans lived over the course of decades.
Yes.
So it's kind of like I'm driving a car at 60 and then like jumping out and letting it keep going. Like, it's not going to just stop right away. Like, it's going to coast for a while until it hits something. So far it hasn't. But yeah, I think that anybody, if you just for argument's sake, you look at right now, millennials, Gen Z have about like I think millennials have 7% of U.S. wealth, and when boomers were the same age in the early 80s, they had 25% of U.S. wealth. Yeah. So, and right now, those same boomers now have, I think, 55% of all U.S. wealth. So you are looking at almost like a 10-to-1 ratio of like wealth transfer, where like basically they've aggregated all of this wealth. It's just like accumulating, and they're doing their best to not release it, but they're also, by the same structure we have now, making it so hard to buy that these people that have latched onto these properties and let them get more and more valuable, those assets are ballooning. You're making it harder for people to enter in, and some people will inherit them. That's true, but you still are going to have taxes. You're still going to have other issues that were going to come up, and even with tax deferment, there's some ways to get around it, but it gets a little bit dicey at scale. People just fall off for whatever reason. Some people just want to cash out and take their money, and you just never know. So you created this effect where the average American of any age other than boomer is less likely to own property. So there's this kind of gap where naturally these big corporate interests are going to say, well, look at all these giant assets that have grown over time, and it's now worth our time to scoop them up. And so they're going to get them instead of these younger generations. So you have basically boomers plus these corporations that are latched onto the vehicle of American like generational wealth. So structurally, we completely fucked ourselves, just absolutely completely fucked. But because the boomers are still okay with it, and they still basically also control our political power, we're kind of stuck waiting for them to
Yeah.
die, and then us to all be impoverished and all be like renters before that's actually going to change. And it's terrifying to see how slow motion of disaster it is, that we see it coming and we realize it's happening, but everyone's just kind of like, well, I guess I'll live in my van life. It'll be cool. like we'll make this hipster and fun. And, you know, unfortunately, we tend to adapt to things pretty easily, and it's just it's a bad thing to adapt to.
This is you're basically now where I am with automation with automation and data. It's the exact same thing, because you know, now we're in this, like, so we are fortunate to be in what we call this PMC, is this label that's applied to us now, the post managerial class, you know, where we white collar, we can work from home and all of that. And while it's great, and you know, as someone who is now put in a position where they could work from home, yeah, there's some great things about it. However, I'm not sure if switching to like in a world where 70 to 80% of the jobs are doing what we're doing will come. The cost of doing so is worth it, because we're just going to be this whole new etched out class, but amongst at the cost of people that will be out of work. And it is definitely something that I think about and worry about.
We're gonna have to do a whole episode about that. But Art, sorry to cut you off, but we do have to get started with the news show. So hey everybody, welcome. Hey everybody, welcome again to an exciting episode of the Crowdsourced Politics News Roundup. I'm your host and moderator, Cypher. Today I am joined by Art Black.
What's going on?
And Travis Scott is joining us once again as a guest. If this is the first time you joined us on a news roundup, we typically go live on Thursdays at 7 p.m. Central's, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But because I'm on mini vacations for the next couple of weeks, we're doing it today for last week. On today's episode, we're going to cover a host of topics. We're going to do some COVID updates and Supreme Court updates, what's going on in Congress, what is going on with Juneteenth, and if that actually matters or if it's just show, and a couple other stuff. So but before I get into that, I do want to say that we are expecting two guests to join us. When they join us, they'll be popped in and they'll do a little introduction of themselves and talk about what they do and give their opinions on that as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I don't know what you all have, what Art or Travis has seen in the news lately, but one of the things that I've noticed is that Biden's most recent goal of hitting, 7 million doses a day or something like that, is looking like for July 4th is looking like it's not going to be met. What's up with that?
Well, as far as the amount of people vaccinated or the amount of doses available?
The amount of people vaccinated.
Yeah, the reason for that is that anyone who wants the vaccine has got it. At this point, now we've hit the wall as far as a cultural vaccine hesitancy among certain elements of American society who have opted to roll the dice and take the chances without the vaccine. So that's basically it.
I'm pretty much in agreement with that. We've hit that wall where it's vaccine hesitancy. Though the situation with Johnson and Johnson, is it back in use now? Is it lifted just with the restrictions? I mean, not with the restrictions, but with the recommendations. Yeah,
all of Europe and the United States pretty much both at the same time determined that it was not anything to be super worried about. Basically, it's the number of blood clots that happen with not most vaccines, but several other kinds of vaccines that happen in essentially basically middle-aged women. So basically, an advisory has been issued that this might happen, but it's so few cases that it's like pretty much statistically not going to happen. So it's not like even a roll of the dice. It's like you have a 0.0000001% chance of getting a blood clot that can be managed. So whatever.
The reason why I bring that up is because the one logistic issue is still in rural America, which is getting elderly or people who have logistic difficulty getting to a vaccine location, the vaccine, because the fact that J&J is just like a more traditional vaccine, and it doesn't require the extreme refrigeration that Moderna and Pfizer have. It was easier. It's easier to distribute. And when there was that moratorium on it temporarily a few months back, that did impact the ability for rural areas to get to get their vaccine rollouts going. It basically brought them to a screeching halt when that had occurred. But that's the only slight obstacle that could be affecting the rates of vaccination other than vaccine hesitancy. It's the only other thing that stands out to me.
No, I agree with that. I do find it. I don't find it odd, but it's more like kind of upsetting odd that it's so much cleaved along political lines of who is vaccine hesitant and who is not. Yeah, you're gonna have some hippie types that are like anti-vaccine because Western medicine sucks or whatever, like Bill Maher. But they're comparatively they're almost non-existent compared to the other side where it's like what 40% or something of Republicans are like no, or they're waiting longer. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, Trump should get credit for the vaccine, but we ain't taking it because we ain't taking no 5G tracking virus, whatever. Yeah.
Oh man! And then the lady that was trying to put the plastic paper clip.
Why is it sticking to my sweaty body? I don't understand.
I have a.
Come on, lady, go take a shower. Ask us afterwards. Ridiculous. No, like if we actually wanted to get serious at this point, we should stop worrying about the rural GOP folks who aren't going to take it and don't care at this point, and move a lot of the vaccines down to the global south, especially Latin America, where we're seeing a lot of high rates when potentially variants could develop. So getting populations down there vaccinated would be much more of a net benefit than trying to work on people here who just for like identitarian reasons just decided that they're not vaccine people. I know people here who either for conspiracy reasons or just because they listen to a lot of talk radio, just decided that they're not going to get the vaccine and they just don't care. And you can't reach them, and we shouldn't bother. Honestly, we shouldn't bother trying.
It's good that you noted to get the vaccines to other countries, because I think it was also recently the Biden administration agreed to donate 3 to 5 million vaccine doses in efforts. I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, but those were doses that we paid for to just being given. And on top of that, actually going forward with the recommendation to WTO in order to remove the patent, not the patent protection, but granting a patent waiver so countries could develop it themselves as well.
So people, you're familiar with the expression of America is the world's policeman. But we should really, it's classic. But we would get more bang for our buck thinking of ourselves as the world's EMT. And if we could actually generate that type of interest in getting, 2 billion vaccines out there to actually push through a lot of these areas that just logistically are going to have a hard time themselves, we've got the kind of capability that the rest of the world would have a hard time duplicating.
True.
And or even through leadership of just getting together other countries that have that kind of production capability and making that a focus. Great for our defense budget. It's wonderful that we've got this top tier military, love it. But at scale, we could do so much better with just that kind of medical assistance to the rest of the world, which really would pay a lot of dividends too, and not just economically, but also just in terms of our own, our moral standing as if we want to be the leader of the free world, let's lead. Like that would be the place to show leadership.
Also, cash works. Ohio had enormous success with the vaccine lottery. The state I'm living in right now, Maryland, implemented a vaccine lottery. Interestingly enough, my wife qualifies for that. And so, but both places have seen continued and ongoing results because of it. So just any state with the political ability to enact that kind of thing, just go ahead and do it because it's worked. It's proven effective.
When we're talking about that West Virginia had that gun lottery, where if you get a vaccine,
Oh yeah.
yeah. Hey, you know what?
There you go.
Whatever
there
works.
you go.
Hey.
Whatever works. Whatever works.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to judge you guys silently, but still, as long as it works, like that's fine. Go for it.
Yeah.
I do. The only thing that I'm worried about with this, it's a massive amount of people refusing to get the vaccine, is what that means for the virus's ability to mutate and create all these variants. We're seeing the UK has the Delta variant is pretty much every single case that is in the UK now, and the Delta variant's making gains in the United States now with the unvaccinated people, unvaccinated counties within the US, and this is the more viral version of COVID. So if they're not getting vaccinated, does that give breathing room to the virus to mutate and break through the vaccine wall?
Well, for argument's sake, let's say that it is. Let's, for argument's sake, say that the world is now being forced in a position where we need to study viruses more because we are faced with a threat that we can't simply treat or ignore. And where I guess I'm going with this is that because of the economic catastrophe that these types of variants could cause, it's going to wind up being a net benefit because it's going to force governments that would rather spend their money on tax breaks for the rich or for military spending or for whatever to actually have to spend on medical research and do things that ultimately are going to benefit mankind. I mean, it's obviously the dumb way to get there. We should just do it because it's the right thing to do. But if we're forced into it, I mean, I personally, if I have to get a new vaccine every year because there's idiots that won't take a vaccine, so we're dealing with all these different variations, it's stupid, but I'll do it. I mean,
that's kind of where I am as well. And you really don't have to look as far over UK. And I believe there's recently been a outbreak in Florida with possible cases of the Delta variant. So yeah, it is a thing.
Yeah. We have a couple of comments coming in from Twitch. We have two from Brad Walker's coming in. Gates and Fauci are fighting mad to not allow other nations to make generic versions of the vaccine. And then he also said they should offer 12 packs of Natty Light with a vax. The dumbasses out there would jump on it. So yeah, I don't know personally if you can make a generic version of the vaccine. I'm not sure. But when usually a generic is a slightly modified version of the product, and it's made cheaper because you can substitute one thing for the other, and the patents aren't necessarily there. But I'm not sure you can do that with a vaccine, so I don't know.
Either of you? The only way they'd be able to do that is if this waiver was actually completely, authorized by WTO. But as far as how the efforts go among other countries, India's actually managed to begin getting themselves under control. I was fortunate enough to speak with a number of prospective clients that have personnel and assets over in India, specifically in Delhi and some other places, which is most impacted by that, and they're steadily ramping up. I'll tell you one thing that you should probably have eyes on would be Japan with the coming Olympics, basically exactly a month from now, and only 6% of their entire population is fully vaxxed, and they're having this event, and it's kind of interesting that they're still going forward with this because the Japanese public don't want it to go forward, and they are protesting. They're protesting any way they can in just nearly every prefecture that this thing shouldn't go forward. We don't want this thing going forward. But the crazy thing is, even if the Japanese government wanted to cancel the Olympics, they can't, because they entered an ironclad contract with the IOC, that basically states that only the IOC has the ultimate authority to cancel the Olympics in Japan, which to me is nuts. Like, you're not the government. You're just a sporting organization. The fact that you have the ability to tell a government no, they can't run an event in their sovereign country is insane to me.
Yeah. It's great that Japan wants to honor the contracts, but when you get down to it, if they really wanted to, they could just say, "This ain't happening." So,
they could be like, but the amount of money potentially lost and everything like that is astronomical. And that's what it boils down to.
That's what it boils
to be honest.
Right.
Now the interesting thing about the whole 6% of the Japanese public being vaccinated is that it's not for a lack of wanting to do it like it is here in the United States. They all want the vaccine. It's that logistically
they don't have the supply.
Get it. For a number of different reasons. Location, they didn't have the manufacturing infrastructure to produce it. Their own government was a little slow on being able to bid on the vaccines in order to get the supply. Maybe a little more like research they wanted to do, or a little less money they're able to put up. Combination of the two. I'm not entirely sure. Just know that that's what's happened. So yeah, it's bad. Like, I don't know. Like, they're doing in-person viewing, but from what I understand, it's still reduced capacity. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, it's reduced capacity. Apparently, they are letting some foreigners come in to spectate, but it's completely restricted. Of course, they'll have social distancing into effect, and the capacity is severely limited, and they can't cheer like you can. Like, it's completely discouraged. You can only clap. Yes. Just jazz hands and clap. That's all. That's all you can do. So it's
It's pretty ridiculous.
Love it.
I don't know. And do you either of you want to make a final comment about COVID before we move on to another topic?
Not a fan.
Yeah, same.
Boom, COVID. COVID's bad.
Yeah. 1 star, would not get again.
Well, so we did talk about COVID pretty well. I think that wraps up that topic. One of the other things that I thought was interesting that's happened in the news recently is with a Supreme Court case that just came out today with Cavi and the boys going with some brewskis. I'm gonna have to wait for Art to sit back down before we get into it, but get into it. But for those that don't know, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the NCAA players, and now college sports will have to pay their players money for participating in college sports.
Is that the actual verdict? Because as I understand it, they could not restrict the players' ability to, find other ways to make money. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if this ruling, it sets forth that they have to get paid. It just means that they can't force their college athletes, to enter these agreements where, hey, you can get a scholarship. We're not going to pay you, but we're going to give you a scholarship. But while you're playing for us, you don't have the right. You can't sell merchandise. You can't get on Twitch and stream. You can't seek these other avenues that virtually anybody else who pursues anything, who comes up with ways to pay for their own education can. I think but I'm not sure if this will lead to earning a salary.
Right, but what's going to happen is that, let's, for instance, say that USC decides they just want to win. So they're just going to, like, you know what? We're just going to start paying players. You're going to suddenly attract all the talent. So you've now created a situation where, however it's going to happen, somebody's going to tap out first, like, okay, you know what? Like, if you can, do X or Y or Z, like, we'll pay you. And then it's just it'll be a chain reaction where one of the colleges will break. They'll start paying, players, and that'll attract players, and then everyone else have to do to compete.
Either that or the under the table sort of bribery that goes on to try to get players where I decided that I was going to give your mother a new Range Rover, but this has nothing to do. This has nothing to do with the Crimson Tide. This is just me. I had a lovely dinner with your mother. She was a nice person, and I just wanted to do this nice thing for her. So I thought it would be great if she just had a Range Rover. Instead, it's just going to be like, look, you sign this, I'm going to give you a 3-bedroom house, 2 Range Rovers. Name what you want to be done with it. This, and they'll just treat it like a big cash advance. It could be that.
Right. Yeah. So no matter the mechanism that it happens by, it's now opened up for people to, make things happen. And all that means is it very quickly, the market is going to start asserting itself, and it's, people will be paid what the market will bear.
And on the bright side, this. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, on the bright side, this could mean that we could finally see a NCAA college football video game now, and because
right. Actually,
yeah, because a big reason why that hadn't happened because there was that lawsuit way back where this guy who had long since graduated, but he played for a university, and his son had bought this particular NCAA game, but it allowed you to go back a couple of years, and so his son showed him his character, like his likeness in the game, and all the stats and everything, and he's like, I was never approached for any of this. I get zero compensation for the fact that I literally have my likeness in this video game, whereas any other NFL player, whether they're the quarterback for the team or the freaking kicker, that man gets a royalty check because of the fact that his likeness is in the game.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
I was just gonna say I was being a little
freaking wild.
I was just going to say I was being a little tongue-in-cheek with Mile. They're going to get paid now. But to Art, what Art was saying is definitely true. With the particular ruling, they upheld a lower court ruling that would allow student athletes to get some additional education-related benefits like reimbursement for academic expenses and internships, though the ruling still kept in place other limits like being directly compensated for playing on sports teams.
Yep.
Now, with that said, the the NCAA was already in talks with players and among themselves in order to increase compensation to try to starve off these antitrust lawsuits and that sort of thing in order to keep the players happy. So eventually I agree with Art, we're going to eventually see just outright being paid. And it's going to be like AA baseball. It's going to be the same thing. There's going to be feeder schools of different sports teams and stuff like that. And you're going to see sponsorships. What I see happening.
Well, so Brad brought up a good point. He just submitted that there's always a strange rule. Athletes can't work, yet they can play pro sports while also playing college sports in a different sport, which is true. So let's be clear. The entire reason why college sports, particularly football, basketball, is set up the way they do is basically it is a monopolization. It is a unholy matrimony between the NCAA and the NFL. This is entirely designed for the NCAA to cultivate a product and basically go to the NFL and say, we have a product that you want, and you can only come to us for that product. You cannot. It's the same reason why NFL recruiters, they cannot go specifically unless it's at an event where the NCAA controls, but they just can't go recruit players at a college game. It is a big no-no. All of this is really just set up to basically just have them control their product. So it's going to be interesting to see how much they're going to try and still protect this little culture or arrangement that they have going on with this ruling.
True.
Yeah. I don't have anything else to really add to this topic. I just thought it was interesting that Kavanaugh gave the boys some brewskis.
Yeah, I'm glad. I like beer. To write the opinion for the court. So I do enjoy that.
And this is a guy like antitrust law. Like you don't think he would really see, given that his ideological bent wouldn't see antitrust law to be a thing. And then he comes in with like the fucking pile driver and be like, "Yup, NCAA, I'm gonna help my boys out here. We're gonna get them compensation. Let's go."
Speaking of antitrust, and I made a post about this on Facebook and received almost no reaction from it. So I truly do feel like I was the only one that was as boosted about the fact. But the new pick, the recently confirmed pick for the FCC or FTC chairman.
Yeah.
Yeah, she is better known as an antitrust lawyer, and her biggest sort of claim to fame is a book she has written about like the fact that big tech should be broken up. And this person has now been confirmed as the FTC chairman. So I am ecstatic about it. I'm happy enough that Anjit Pai isn't there anymore, but this is just icing on the cake. Icing on the cake.
I'm going to have to look up this person. I didn't see the post, but then again, Facebook's algorithms have been shit lately. So speaking of, if you guys do happen to do Facebook, join the Facebook group. But we are building up our Discord community, so you can find the Discord links in the description below or in the little links above of here. We just basically chill out, talk about politics, talk about stocks, talk about a bunch of different stuff. Like brag to us about what you're doing. If you made some fly ass food, fucking throw that shit if it was fire. So let's do it.
Okay.
So join our community. We're more than just a political debate community. We're trying to build an actual community of like-minded individuals and with some rough and tumble. So go ahead and do that. But so the antitrust is definitely a huge thing. I know that you've said that you wanted to be on a cast that we do, an actual cast. This is kind of more of a fun thing we do, but an actual cast produced on antitrust and technology. So we are keeping that in mind. Just me being on vacation and people being busy as they are, we just haven't had a chance to get everybody together to actually do those. But stay tuned. I'll keep you informed and our audience informed as well about that.
Just random observation about the Supreme Court, but ever since it's gotten, tilted with all of, Trump's yahoos, I don't know exactly quite how to say this, but like even with all of these like weird Federalist Society yahoos that they have jacked in there, the court's still been fairly reasonable lately.
Which we pointed this out in our last discussion. We pointed this very thing out, and apparently CNN has finally caught in on the observation as well, and they they offer an interesting new explanation for that. And basically, what they're saying is what's happening is the makeup of the court is now 3-3-3, where you have sort of your 3 liberals, your 3 moderates, and then 3 far right. And because of that, that's what's causing this dynamic. Not too sure if I can go with that, but it kind of makes a little bit of sense. But
I can see that to a degree. I mean, Roberts is very much an institutionalist, and he very much wants to keep the court from being overly politicized. And there's been, I know that there's been reports from Supreme Court watchers, like Neaton Tonenberg, saying that there's been a ruckus in the back rooms about arguing of different cases and that sort of thing. But with Roberts always trying to like steer it, but like, hey, we have to make sure that the court doesn't like get changed if we go too far one way or the other. And I think that's having some pull. But also it's kind of the cases that have been coming up lately too, right? So even though the Federalist Society people are ideologically conservative as all hell, their antitrust, their view of antitrust is very much already the view of the court in the antitrust anyways, because of how antitrust has been looked at since about 1978-ish or so. And so it's just kind of following precedent. And, so you have that. We haven't had any big, huge bombshell cases yet. We're going to get those though. Abortion's coming.
Obamacare won its ruling for the umpteenth time. The Supreme Court has again upheld it for it. This is the 4th, 5th challenge now? I've lost count.
And the reason being is that because it's really just a fine, guys. Like you can't and then they got rid of the mandate basically, so the fine isn't there. So it's just like basically a regular law at this point, and so it's like whatever. So, and it was a heritage. Honestly, the left is right about this. It was a heritage. It was kind of a heritage plan. At least it became one anyway.
It was Nixon care. Like
Yeah.
this was like first discussed like in the early 70s. Like this whole idea was supposed to be a gift to the insurance companies. Like it used to be like a right-wing idea. So that it mutated this far, and this is now like, you know, the liberal idea is just, you know, unfortunately.
No, go ahead.
It's just how captured both sides of our political spectrum are by like right-wing economics. Like it's wonderful that like we have all these woke corporations, and you know, socially things are trended very far left, but our idea of economics is so entirely like bought off on both sides that even when we had this discussion, you know, the goalposts are just so shifted to the right. It's just ridiculous.
It's so true. It's so true. And you know, if the Medicare expansion was upheld, or Medicaid expansion was upheld, and if the public option was actually put in, if you know, if Kennedy didn't die and Jim and Brown didn't get voted in office, that probably would have actually stayed in. If these two things were the reality of today, then it would be a liberal left leaning plan. But because of these things that happened due to the circumstances of the time, it's not. And so why would Republicans be against this? Like they're all about personal responsibility, right? And they wanted they were Nixon, Gingrich was like, we have to have individual responsibility. If you're going to have healthcare, everybody should be mandated to have healthcare. Well, that's what the ACA does. So it's annoying to me, but I mean, at this point, it's settled. It should be considered settled law. Speaking of Supreme Court cases that didn't go the left's way, we have the Supreme Court backing the Catholic group that the Pennsylvania law not law, but the removing of the Catholic group from the ability to sign off on foster parents. Do either of you know exactly what this case was, or should I go ahead and give basically a recap of it? All right, let me pull it up really quick so I make sure I dot my T's, cross my I's. So the U.S. Supreme Court embraced religious rights over LGBT rights on Thursday by ruling in favor of a Catholic Church affiliated agency that sued after Philadelphia refused to place children for foster care with the organization because it barred same-sex couples from applying to become foster parents. Long story short, a lot of things have been public-private partnerships with different organizations, either fully private or nonprofit groups, and they help the state go through and validate that a person is fit to be a foster parent. This particular group refused to do that in defiance of Pennsylvania law, where they would say every single LGBT couple is not a fit parent. And Pennsylvania, following its law, said that we will no longer do business with you. They sued, and the Supreme Court said this isn't a fair approach to ensuring that the government's needs are met, and therefore had struck down the law. Let's see. Conservative and religious advocacy groups cheered this. Oh, I'm sorry. In the ruling, Roberts wrote, CSS seeks only an accommodation that will allow it to continue serving the children of Pennsylvania in a manner consistent with its religious beliefs. It does not seek to impose those beliefs on anyone else. Never mind the fact that this is not serving the interests of necessarily the child by removing people from the pool of potential parents, foster parents. So that's and that went 7-2, 8-1. I'll have to double check. But go ahead.
So this organization, I guess, are they like the de facto one that signs off on these things in PA?
There's one. They're one of several groups. So, like I said, in a lot of states, the government has its own little agency that will help verify and validate that people are fit to be foster parents. But they work with other organizations to basically increase reach to make it go faster. And this is one of those groups that they have partnered with. They partner with a bunch of different groups. So there's been Planned Parenthood groups that have been, or Planned Parenthood parenthood action groups, that affiliated groups that have been with this. There's several. It's a lot of religious organizations because that's who mostly kind of does these things. You don't really see many secular groups in this realm with it. But yeah.
I guess the point I was mainly trying to get at is, do you have other options? Because if you have other options to go and try and get this vetting, then I can see why the ruling went 7-8-1.
It was 8-1. So
because if you have the option to just go someplace to go to some other group or to go, I would make that choice and basically try to avoid religious groups altogether. It just seems that.
And I would have to get into the nitty gritty of how many groups there are, where they're located, and that sort of thing. Because it could be potentially that only religious affiliated groups do this sort of work outside of the government, and then it would raise to the civil rights violation. But I do find this to be interesting though, because there was a Supreme Court ruling, Bob Jones University versus the United States. This happened in 74. Let me look it up though. Bob Jones versus United States, not versus that. Let me look it up really quick. Let's see. This was in, what the heck? Hold on. It was during the Rehnquist court. Here it is. Yeah, it was 1983. So in this particular court case, the Supreme Court ruled overwhelmingly that the government can have an interest in promoting a certain group of socially beneficial axioms, despite the fact that those might be contrary to religious beliefs. And in this particular instance, Bob Jones University would not admit Black people to its university or anybody in an interracial relationship. So they basically said your religious belief does not override the civil rights of other people. So you're not allowed to do this, even as a private organization. And I don't know how they can square that precedent with something like this.
Yeah, well, I think this again, that goes back to that goes back to the question I had about are they like, do you have options on other places to go? With universities, that's less of an option, so that's easier to argue. Plus, they're an educational institution; they get public funding, so there's a lot of there's a lot of that, and it feels like, I feel like even then you still have cases of universities doing that kind of scrutiny, where I know of, at least at BYU, you've had cases of you have that oath or whatever, and if you don't, if you violate the I forget, what do they call it, like an oath of celibacy or something like that. There's basically like a list of essentially commandments that you have to follow, if you're on an athletic scholarship or any kind of thing at BYU, and if you don't, you are essentially, you can't participate in the game. I know there was one particular like MVP player that couldn't they were well on their way to winning the conference, and they could not, they couldn't, because their best player was out of the game, because they literally found out that he, like most college college kids had sex with his then girlfriend. Oh, the horror.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really like these. I consider it to be over deferential to religious beliefs, because I don't see the difference between saying that you and we'll talk about this case because it's going to go to court as well. But for example, the baker, the guy that denied baking a wedding cake for a couple. To me, there is a better squaring of that circle, and that is for that particular case. In that particular case, it's going to referral only for wedding cakes. That way, you don't ever get into that situation where you have to deny somebody their rights, because, well, you're never going to get referred, right?
Well, not
at least
only
that would be the idea.
well, not only that, but I feel like despite how politically controversial that became, it was pretty cut and dry. Like, hey, if you're just walking in and you want a cake, he just can't not sell you a cake. Now, if you're asking him to bake a custom cake, making a specific expression that violates his beliefs, then it's the equivalent of like forcing a Jewish painter to paint swastikas just because you want him to, you know. I understood where they were ruling with that, and I felt like it was a fairly reasonable, really, like, hey, if you got cakes that are already for sale, let them buy the damn cake. But if they want you to make an artistic expression that violates, you can't force the guy to do that.
Yeah, and this is an important thing because Jared Marshall from Facebook went ahead and said it: when rights collide, defaulting to do no harm makes sense. And I very much get this argument. I think it opens up too much leeway in allowing religion to circumvent civil law. And in the case of public accommodations, you run a whole host of things that we had to have the Civil Rights Act to force people and businesses to serve people that they wouldn't normally have, and that actually led to progress. You know, maybe not as much as anybody would like. We still have a whole host of issues. Don't get me wrong, but we still have, like, you know, people are less likely to be like, no, just go away, right? So I don't know. It's an icky thing for me, and I don't really like it. Reasonable accommodations make sense. I don't necessarily know if, you know, saying that you can just be like, no, I'm not going to do that. If it's just a regular wedding cake, not anything being written on it, no topper, like they just wanted a classic, like, sheen white wedding cake for their wedding, and they were told no. And there was a couple of cases. There was the guy that we're going to talk about in a little bit, and then there was another one with a lesbian couple that got denied their cake like 2 days before their wedding, because they found out that it was a lesbian couple. So, but
we're doing our podcast.
It's all right.
This is my master chef.
Nice. How you doing? But Art, we were just talking about the
oh yeah,
we were just talking about the I got muted. We were just talking about the case in Pennsylvania with the Supreme Court ruling 8-1 on allowing or disallowing Pennsylvania to cut ties with the Catholic group that refused to vet gay couples. Is there anything you would like to add to that?
They wanted to vet gay couples?
So just as a quick recap, in Pennsylvania and a lot of other states partner with different groups, usually religious groups, in order to help with the vetting of potential foster parents.
Right.
So they cut ties with this Catholic group who refused to do it for gay couples, and the Supreme Court ruled against the state.
Okay. I mean, don't work with that Catholic group then.
All right, fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's stupid, but, you know, ultimately, you know, a lot of religious freedom just gets down to, may we still be bigots, please? And, you know, I guess technically, if you want to have that little bubble and we want to do that, it's dumb. But, you know, as long as we can work around that with other groups, and you just want to have this small slice that wants to do their own thing, I'm not thrilled. But, you know,
right.
You know, like I see the counter arguments, so I'm not.
That's kind of Art. You're kind of where I'm at with that too.
Yeah, I mean,
path of least resistance.
You know, like if there was no workaround, it'd be different if they were the only like game in town. We had to go through this Catholic group, and also the Catholic group wanted to do X, Y, and Z. But like, you know, realistically, you know, they're probably a small slice of the pie, and there's probably plenty of other ways to get around them, and those ways will grow. So, you know, like I said, path of least resistance. You know, I don't love it, but you know, it ultimately doesn't really mean anything. So, you know, I feel like we can work around it easily. So, okay, like be dumb, whatever. Like,
and go ahead. I was gonna say, and I feel like if I was in LGBTQ, and I'm trying to adopt a kid. And if my choice was only religious organizations, I'm gonna look for something like universalist, unorthodox, hippy dippy, like something. I'm not gonna go for these super fundamentalist, like, okay, Latter Day Saints, let me cross that out, and Catholics, let me cross that out.
Right.
No, for sure.
I'm just saying, like, all these super religious groups who just they zero in on that. I'm like, okay, so are you also banning people that eat shellfish or that have garments cut from one part?
Right,
or like,
right,
like,
right.
are we going to do all of Deuteronomy, or are we just going to do like? I don't get it, but I guess it's a thing. So
yeah,
well,
yeah.
Shellfish don't trigger the disgust response, but LGBT people do. That's what it boils down to.
Okay, I'm just saying people don't want to eat cicadas, but they eat like lobster. So
cicadas.
Did anybody try? Because there was a couple places around me that did that, making like cicada tacos. I didn't. I
did not.
For whatever reason, I just never got around to it.
I don't think that was happening in Austin. I don't know if it was happening further south or not. But no.
Yeah, I was going to say one of my friends that has a Facebook group on like basically like food and culinary stuff, and she live streamed trying it out. She actually thought it was pretty good.
Nice. Nothing wrong with bugs.
I had shrimp last night.
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
cheap. like as long as you pretend that it's a delicacy, then it doesn't matter how gross it is.
Yep.
So we were talking about the Pennsylvania case, and I think it's important to bring up the Colorado baker because he was just fined another $500 for refusing to bake a cake for a transgender woman. Now, this is a mild lawsuit, small claims or whatever in Colorado. Same mechanism that the first couple went through. But this lawsuit happened right after he said that he would bake a cake for somebody else, any LGBT person, like he would give them a cake, right? As long as it didn't violate his religious beliefs. And so this person called in and was like, hey, will you bake me a cake for my transition, a birthday party / transition celebration. And so they wanted a blue outside and a pink inside. And he said no, because he doesn't agree with trans people that think they can change their gender. And so she sued. And now we're having another thing where it's going all over across conservative media. And like, this guy can't get a break. Look at these radical leftist heathens trying to force their way of life on the rest of us. Why can't we just be left alone? And with all that said, I think this one actually has more of a point the way that the original case was ruled than the original case did. Because in this particular instance, it was forced artistic expression because it was a particular cake with a particular style with a particular message, whereas the other one was just a wedding cake.
Yeah.
So I again, it's icky to me, and I know that I might get quote unquote canceled for this, but I understand the argument. I'm not comfortable with these kind of things being done for reasons that I stated earlier. But either one of you want to weigh in on it a little bit?
I feel like if it was just a color thing, like just bake the cake with the colors. Like I don't.
Yeah. But it has a particular message, so I get his point as well. Like I don't know, it's very weird. It's icky.
Yeah, if you're going to do public commerce, then I think that you need to put your politics aside. Unfortunately, we're so polarized, and it's such this like identity focused lifestyle that people are being kind of corralled into, where they feel that they can't do anything without it saying something about something. And sometimes I have to like you, but I'm just here at working the register, man. Like whatever you want to buy, okay, I'm just here to bring you up. People get way wrapped around the axle about some of this stuff, and it really, in your 9 to 5, you shouldn't be thinking in those terms. Like,
Yes.
I get if you're it's very, very narrow fields. Like if you're some kind of artist and let's say you have a body of work where you make money off of your body of work, let's say, I don't know, some painter that paints like gay themes, and then you have somebody that wants to hire you to do some weird like giant mural that's like super anti-gay or something, and you're like, hey, this would actually hurt me professionally, like not just I disagree with the message, but like there's probably some reasonable limitations, but beyond that, like if it's not like a direct threat to you making money, like let's say that you're like super religious and you work at some store and you don't want to ring up people who are buying birth control, like, you know what, go fuck yourself. Like,
yes.
I don't care. Like,
yes.
That's not what any of this is. You're just here to do business and make some money and then go live your life. Like, while you're on the clock, just do your job. And this is not a reflection on your morality. You're just making money. Outside of like really, really, niche artistic endeavors where you're hired as an artist because you do a certain type of art. Other than that, I don't care. Just fucking bring it up.
Yeah, quite well put, eloquently put.
Thanks.
I tend to lean on that side. Travis, I don't know if you're aware, but your camera is still off if it's not meant to be off. Just FYI.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's cool if it's mean to be off, and just making sure you're aware. So yeah, I think that wraps up that little bit. I think we would be.
Look what can happen if your child goes.
Just Facebook updates.
So for those that might might be joining us first time this week, first time seeing the news roundup, we like to do this little thing called News of the Weird. And Art, I dropped the link in the private chat earlier. I don't know if you can see it, but we're about to play it anyways because this thing is hilarious.
Oh, okay, go on. What do we got?
Hold on a second. I need to set up share screen. Oh, not screen. Chrome tab. All right. Sheriff gets attacked by flying dildo.
Okay. All right.
I didn't notice earlier in the video before the lady in the audience is like, does anybody see what I see? Is anybody? Is it just me? Okay. I'm the crazy one.
Nobody expects a flying dildo, but that's exactly what confronted Albuquerque Sheriff Manuel Gonzalez III, whose campaign for mayor was dramatically interrupted at an event on Tuesday by a large sex toy attached to a drone. The drone hovered towards Gonzalez as he was answering a confrontational question from a member of the audience, and it provoked nervous laughter from the crowd of about 70 people. Gonzalez attempted to continue muddling through his answer as a woman in the audience asked, "Is that dong on a drone?" And as you can see, that is what we had.
We saw in the video. Oh,
they didn't expect it.
No one expected it. No one expected to see a dong.
That nobody saw that coming.
The offending object was then snatched from the air by a man identified in the press as the owner of the establishment hosting the event, Revel Entertainment Center. The incident resulted in criminal charges for a 24-year-old Colleen Ashby Dreyer, who has reportedly been accused of punching Gonzalez on his hands during a brief scuffle at the foot of the stage after the flying dildo was grounded and Dreyer tried to retrieve it. Dreyer has been charged with petty misdemeanor battery and misdemeanor resisting, evading, or obstructing an officer, according to the Albuquerque Journal. Dreyer reportedly told the police that he didn't mean to hit Gonzalez, but was upset by the way the sheriff answered a question and had meant to swing his fist in the air. Gonzalez's campaign issued a defiant statement saying that the candidate was unhurt and blamed the whole thing, which was captured on video, on a coordinated attempt to disrupt his campaign. "I will not be intimidated," Gonzalez said. But the incident may be more complex than it appears, and it remains unclear who exactly was behind the dildo drone. So yeah, just a little fun thing that we like to do over at the News Roundup. Share a little bit of weird news we saw in the last week or two with the audience to break up the news and talk about a little something. What does it say about society? So what are you guys' thoughts about this? We're assaulting police officers, running from there with drododones now. What's going on?
I just hope it doesn't become a thing. That's all. I just hope it doesn't become a thing.
Well, I mean, on one hand, it's kind of funny, but on the other hand, and not to be morbid, but you get that close to a politician with a drone with a dong in it, you could have something a lot more potent. Let's say, like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I thought it'd go either way with that, but no. But like, what if that was like a hand grenade?
Oh, right.
Even with like a very cheap commercial drone, you now have the capability to move very quickly and close a large distance with with people that normally could have security and screening around them. And by the time you see a drone like that, I mean, there are certain anti-drone countermeasures that the military has and all that, but imagine
you don't. And the countermeasures you don't even need. There's aftermarket. There's rare consumer market countermeasures that you can get for drones, like jammers for that. So I imagine that could probably be like a new precaution they'll take. I mean, it should be to begin with. So, yeah.
Right, but just the way that the technology is progressing, you don't have to get that close. When you think about you're basically looking at just certain amounts of trigonometry for these devices where you could have, let's say, a gun mounted on it. It doesn't have to get that close to be able to aim and shoot at somebody. Like, this is very basic stuff right now.
Yeah.
I mean, even just closing it with someone with an explosive, you could find the trajectory and zoom in, and even if a jammer hits you, you're still already on the trajectory. You're basically a missile at that point. And even if you're jammed, it's just going to keep going as it's going. And after its target, to say nothing of if it's a mile away with some kind of gun that's built into it or mounted or whatever, like that technology is very, very rapidly approaching the point where you're going to have very effective assassination tools that are very cheap and easy to produce, and your countermeasures are going to be fine for up close, but the further and further out you get, you're just raising the bar for it a little bit. But I feel like weapons beat armor in the end. Ultimately armor is useful, but just that's kind of the arc of things, is that eventually the weapons outpace the armor, and it's gonna be hard for soft humans like us to beat that type of threat for long. It's just a matter of time before somebody really goes hard against U.S. politicians with drones, and it hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen, and it's going to shock everyone, but it shouldn't.
And another issue with the jammers is you also have to plan around that from a communications perspective, because if you're going to jam for drones, just expect that cell phone communication is not going to be an option anywhere in that remote area as well. So there's a lot of things. I would not want to be a security expert at that in that situation, because this is most like, I guarantee you, there's somebody at some level having this conversation since this incident. Yeah.
Well, and if you really want to get down to like people that really understand that you have a whole electromagnetic spectrum, which is very carefully parsed out by the FCC of who's allowed to do what on what frequency. But if you're talking about, hey, like, we only need to be running on this for like 5 minutes while we kill this guy, you can be on frequencies you shouldn't be on and that they might not be jamming on. I mean, there are certain types of there are certain jammers that will work very broad based, but to jam all frequencies, that gets into like, what if you affect someone's what if they have like a heart monitor, like a pacemaker? There's all kinds of unexpected consequences that could come from trying to jam every frequency at all times. What if you need to call 911 and you can't get a call out?
And that's the point I was making about the comms.
Right. So it's actually, like I said, it hasn't really happened yet. There have been some instances with cartels in Mexico and some other Latin American countries where they've done some pretty I hate to say sweet, but let's just say very interesting assassinations with drones and explosives and fly them up and detonate them. It's usually against police chiefs or lower level folks who are just part of the greater drug war, and it's in a certain sense no more interesting than a bomb or a gun. But what they've been doing in Latin America, just with basic drones, should terrify U.S. politicians, because somebody's going to decide that they don't like X, Y, or Z and just go take him or her out. And when it actually starts happening here, it's going to click with everyone of like, oh my God, like this could happen to anybody at any time.
Yep.
I've seen it. I mean, where I was, we are aware. I can't really say much about it, but yes, it does exist. It's pretty much, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. And it's only going to it's only going to ramp up very quickly as the technology improves. It's going to scale up very quickly.
We do have 2 comments about this topic from our audience. So we have Jared Marshall saying, clap, clap, clap. My company is developing some sketchy shit like this. We're also interested in countermeasures, but offense has an unimaginable advantage unless you're using very advanced electro shifting, I think he meant. And then Brad was saying, on a serious note, chemical drops could also be used on large crowds from the air. Can you imagine flying some drones that just over a crowd that are just spraying chemical weapons? I mean, and you don't have to get that exotic with chemical weapons. I mean, the stuff they were using in World War I is not rocket science. I mean, anybody could do that. And to put that into some drones, some tanks, and fly it over a crowd, I mean, nightmare scenario stuff. And it's easy. Like it's just hasn't happened yet. But it's like that guy in Vegas who just decided, hey, I'm just going to rent a room and just shoot people and just like take the crowd out. Like once it happens, like, oh my God, like, was it really that easy? But it's going to be that easy with drones too. And you see some of these drone shows where they'll go up and you'll have like 50 drones up and they'll do all these exotic patterns and all that. Like, just imagine having 50 drones up with chemical tanks attached that are going after crowds in some city. Like that bar is getting much lower very quickly. Yep.
And just
Mustard gas isn't hard to make, and hope we don't will this into existence. But Jared also corrected me. No, electro shitting, very official terminology. So jokes on me.
Interesting.
You were gonna say? No. So
I mean, I've been out of the game for 10 years, and I mean, the shit that I knew back then is, would keep people up at night. So what they're working on now is probably, exponentially worse.
Drones not my wheelhouse. Some more AI and crap. So,
which that alone. Speaking of keeping people up at night.
Jesus Christ.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So how's our boy Yang doing with that? I guess this is a good segue to talk about Yang's Mayoral.
America's doomed, and that's just yet another reason why. So.
Last I checked, we talked earlier this morning, he's currently, as we speak, because you can actually, it's the Matt Show, which is a big Yang follower, is streaming him and Garcia campaigning right now. So I'm interesting to see how that plays out, because as you, Cypher, you're a big proponent of ranked choice voting, and this will be the first major election where ranked choice voting will determine who wins the election. And this is the first time you've actually seen any sort of like strategy where 2 politicians come together to try and campaign to get their votes to shift in a way to sort of block another candidate. So it's kind of interesting.
True.
Universal Discourse, so glad for you to join us. I don't know.
I couldn't break away at all, so I finally this is as good as it gets for me today. So, that's what I'm doing.
It's fine.
Anyway.
So Universal, now that you're here, I just want to point out I am not wearing suspenders. I just happen to be where my.
Oh.
I didn't notice until you pointed that out.
So just so we're.
It looks exactly like suspenders, right?
It's awesome.
So.
It's like your gardener's apron or something.
Right, exactly. I'm a mess when I eat. So. I just want to be clear, just so you know.
Well, I think it looks cool. Now you ruined the illusion for me.
I meant to do that.
Wow. I was going to compliment you on your style. It
Looked
like a cardigan with a really bright trim. I was like, oh, dashing. Nice.
Right.
He's just like, nah, tricking the light. Oh,
suspenders are pure light. That's what it is.
You don't believe in fairies either. Shoot. Ruined it.
So I don't I don't know how much you were able to hear Universal, but we are starting to talk a little bit about Yang and the New York mayor race going on.
Yeah, the one who's so far on the outside. He's never even voted.
I don't know.
Eric Adams seems like he's got the advantage right now, but I feel like he has people who are going to vote for him, but I think that the people who are voting for other people are not going to rank him. So this may be actually a chance where you will see a ranked choice, really come into play.
Yeah.
That kind of center-right folks who just care about crime, like, I get it. Like, he's your guy. He's a retired cop. He used to be a Republican. For people who are tired of the direction that New York's been going in, he'd be a good alternative. But America's just doomed if we can't do better than that. We're just doomed. That's all. I know.
So cynical. Where's that hope, Art? Where's the hope?
My hope is actually that my boy Yang's playing the system, and he's actually going to use that ranked choice to get over the top.
That's kind of what I'm hoping as well. It's kind of what I'm hoping as well.
You want him to win?
I do. I'm a big fan. He's got some obvious flaws, but overall, we need more politicians like him.
That's what they said about Trump.
Well,
so
let's play devil's advocate here. We do need people who are not politicians, that are outsiders. Trump himself is a fake. He's always been a fake. So, by that, obviously, no, we don't need people who are just fraudulent con men. But as far as people who are in business, science, medicine, people who are not normal politicians, if you go to China,
are politicians ever normal?
No, they are.
True.
No, for real. If you go to China, the people who are running major cities there, or even Angela Merkel, she's a scientist. Chinese politicians are engineers and scientists. They're educated in hard science STEM fields. They are serious people. Our politicians are fucking clowns. They're social media stars. We have morons running our country. So to have people who actually understand, Yang talks about AI and things in a way that a normal politician, they can barely answer their own email. They're just, they're not qualified to do, what it takes to lead a 21st century nation. We just have this antiquated system that foists these social media, cultural warrior stars on us. So
why do my political donations go in the spam box, Mr. Zuckerberg? That's where it is. So for the most part, people voted for Trump mainly on his appeal and personality, whereas I would argue that the majority of Yang Gang was just the policy, it just made sense. Now, if anybody else who is speaking to the same policy in the same and the same proposals, I guarantee you most of them would hop on and support that person. It's just right now, really the only person that's talking about things like automation, things like UBI, and things like that just happens to be Andrew Yang. Plus, a lot of how we dealt with the pandemic and addressing the fact that it's put a ton of people out of work at the height of it, how the whole stimulus check thing, that would not have ever been a discussion had it not been for the groundwork laid of all of us talking about UBI. That would not have been a concept. So you just have to, you just can't help but acknowledge that.
I don't know so much about that, but universal discourse, you have opinions and thoughts. I want to get your opinions and thoughts on this.
Mm-hmm.
On
what we're talking about. You asked Art, why does he support Yang? I'm sure that you have a counter proposal.
Yeah, well, no, I was just curious why support. I didn't like his profile. I don't like the way he's presented. I think I don't have enough to work with on him because he's been so left of center. I have a track record and I don't know what the agenda is. And I'm looking through the media and I'm like, is he that away from the center that nobody understands his agenda? So I really need to know what the actual agendas are, not whose party or how many medals you had. I don't really care. I don't vote for charisma.
Right.
I want to hear about what do you think you can do second.
Right.
Can you do it?
Right.
Can you do it? I don't
Right.
care what you say you want. We all want lollipops. We're getting hot dogs, right?
Yeah.
So what is Yang gonna do, and what can Yang do realistically?
Yeah. So one of the proposals, probably his biggest one as far as New York specifically is concerned, is starting with a basic income guarantee for New Yorkers that are within an income threshold. I don't know what the income threshold is. I can't remember it. You can find it on his mayoral website. But it's if it was enacted, it would stand to benefit at least um, something like around what 500,000 New Yorkers in the various boroughs in the city, and go up from there. And the way he's proposing to pay for it is by enacting a tax. Because one interesting thing about New York City is venues like Madison Square Garden and a few others, they essentially get tax waivers. So they don't essentially pay a tax. These large institutions that have these multi-million-dollar events and make all this money, they don't pay a tax. And by just simply removing that waiver, you could use that revenue to pay for that job program.
What's
Or
that
not job program, but that income program.
Right.
They're
And
large
just to,
because they have that waiver.
Say again?
They're large because they have that waiver.
Are they though?
Madison Square Garden. I mean,
Yeah.
there's been times where it bankrupted, almost tanked many times. Many times.
okay, so let's segue this into another proposal from Yang, which is having a People's Bank of New York. So you have roughly 2% of small businesses in the state that are black owned. You have commercial lenders that, for various reasons don't lend to mom and pop smaller businesses. So the idea would be to get your average New Yorker out from having to do like the check advance people that have these crazy high rates, or small businesses like mom and pop shops that can't get normal loans, and actually provide banking services to communities that traditionally are locked out from larger commercial like lenders. There's so much that can be done structurally to help communities that are usually not serviced by these large institutions, that just having somebody in that position that recognizes that that's a problem in the first place is the first step towards fixing the problem at all. So right now, a lot of these people are going in there, they couldn't even articulate that problem, much less have any interest in solving it.
What population is he trying to benefit?
Well, lower income.
Lower middle class,
beneath-
essentially.
Lower middle class. So, okay. So
Or-
he's
and
trying
people
to
that-
shore them up so that they don't go further down.
Mhm.
Or with
Well,
the loan program also be a hand up.
Yeah,
So-
but also like for a lot of these like check cashing places, like you have a lot of people who are living paycheck to paycheck and they'll take advanced loans out. I mean, even if
I've
you
done
think
it.
about your own bank, like if you bounce a check or something, or whatever they charge you these service fees, banks make billions of dollars off of people who don't have billions of dollars. Like they're basically charging you for being poor and not having enough money to make your rent or your bills, whatever. So you do these check advances where you have to basically borrow against your own money for money you're about to make, and you're losing money in the process. So being able to cut out all these, like basically these predatory institutions that go after poor people who, I don't know if you've ever had to deal with these guys, but like,
Yeah.
check cashing against like your
Yeah.
own paycheck, it's a complete ripoff. But
Yeah.
the only thing
The interest rate is insane.
300.
It's 300% plus.
It should be illegal, but the idea that you are going after people who are that desperate is obscene. So just taking that away from these lenders and saying, we'll have a People's Bank. It'll be a place where people can, have these services that are normally paying out the ass for, or even for like a small business, like getting a $25,000, $50,000 loan for a small business is nothing to a large lender. But if you have a small shop you're trying to get going, like that could be, that could be your difference between making and breaking. And it's that. Again, I don't know if you guys ever had to deal with like big banks or stuff like that, but
Yeah, Merrill
me personally, like I'm extremely privileged. I've got it very good. Don't feel bad for me, but like I have a rough time dealing with these assholes. So like if people who are way below me on the totem pole are completely screwed. Like the whole game is rigged. For the bigger you are, the easier your life is, and the smaller you are, it gets exponentially harder.
Yeah.
So just trying to invert that pyramid so that you have the banking system for an institution that's built for lower income, middle income people. That'd be a game changer. So like I think structurally there's a lot of stuff that maybe not doesn't sound as sexy as being mad over Dr. Seuss and Mr. Potato Head, but still important for people's daily lives.
Yeah.
Well, then you still have to take into consideration credit, running your credit.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, that's
what's the other thing?
Entirely of its own, but yeah.
Stability. The way that they rate you is where they get you. That's where they get you.
Yeah, it's.
They should make that. They should just take it off of. They should just eliminate it. I mean, honestly, just eliminate it.
There's ways that this kind of bank could avoid the whole credit rating system by doing it based on income and some other things that have been mentioned by people. Assets, income, how often they pay back their utility bills, stuff like that. So I would assume that would be one of the ways this could go about.
Honestly, because
for at least the businesses
have been paying their utilities every month, every day of their life.
Yeah.
All right, there's your damn credit.
Yeah.
Keep the lights on, right? Yeah. If you don't help him, he's not going to keep the lights on, and he's not going to eat.
Yeah.
Like it's just that black and white simple. That's how I grew up, anyway.
Yeah, and there's plenty.
In America,
I was going to say there's plenty of.
Harder it is to get it.
So Travis first, and then Art, because I can't hear you if you both talk at the same time.
Yeah, I was going to say Universal. There's plenty of down by me. There's plenty of car dealerships. We have a place Eastern, and they do just that. Their whole thing is not using credit to get you approved for the car, and the way they do it is prove that you have a job, and then have a bill that you pay. Can you do these two things? Cool, we can put you in a car, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Except now with COVID, you can't prove you have a job because you don't.
True.
DES for food stamps either.
Be like, I work from home.
I got a Twitch payment.
With
my bank statement, you figure out whether I have a job.
What is horsehead ASMR?
That sounds wonderful. I'm going to check that
out. All right, what were you going to say about this?
I forget. It wasn't that good. Sorry.
Horsehead ASMR.
Oh man, that whole thing.
You guys are at like balloons, you
know. We do have to talk about. I do feel like we have to talk about Juneteenth and what that actually means. Not just the holiday itself, but also some of the things that are being done to make that just symbolism rather than being anything else.
Well, Trump was very proud of it back when he was talking about it a couple years
ago. Of course.
And it was a good point. And suddenly, they're not.
So was Charlie Kirk. So was PragerU.
No, loved it. The big fans. Yep. Yeah, Ben Shapiro, they all thought it was great. And then suddenly, just seemed to have lost interest. So it's weird.
Oh, and
I
now
never heard of Juneteenth. I'm busy celebrating National Indigenous Day because my people decided. Really? And we're gonna respond to National Indigenous Day by launching the Cancel Canada Day movement. So
okay.
Cancel Canada. I think something we should all rally around.
It's I don't know more. It's our chiefess. Teresa's dead. Hashtag Cancel Canada Day. It's all set. Going on down on July the 1st. We're gonna cancel Canada.
Wow.
I can't wait.
Okay, long overdue.
So I'm like, is Juneteenth like Cancel Canada?
Yeah. I mean, so Union troops had got it to Texas, and basically it was the last of the enslaved population to get the update.
The last people
of Galveston.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
In Galveston, Texas.
Of the results of the Civil War and all that. So.
It makes you shudder to think of it.
In a nutshell, the importance of the day is even though the 13th Amendment was enacted and the Emancipation Proclamation was signed, slavery in America did not actually end in totality until 2 years later on June 19th, hence Juneteenth.
It ended?
Well,
what?
Technically ended by the.
I get you the little except in crime or form of punishment.
Right.
I get that, but yes, as far as an institution, it ended it ended 2 years after on June 19th, which was
Right.
it was more of like a regional holiday. Growing up in Texas as I did, that's why I was aware of it, because it's a part of Texas history. But when you think about it, it is national history. It is a significant day.
Not only that, but just as as a former conservative who like
What?
No, feel free to laugh or throw things, but but the whole idea is that even though America wasn't perfect when it was founded, it had the seed of perfecting itself within. Okay.
No, go ahead.
We'll give her a minute.
It's okay. We do understand.
So glib. Well, even though America wasn't perfect when it was founded.
Right. No, I realize how grotesque the statement is, so I've had longer to process it, so.
I guess so.
But I mean, the way I always frame that, so about that, like the way I frame that is, even when the country was founded, the way the document that you start with the preamble, it pretty much accepts the understanding that at its inception, we still have work to do to get this to be perfect. That's the whole to form a more perfect union.
All I was trying to say is that the standard conservative framing of it is that even like the Declaration of Independence, like everything frames it in a certain way of like, this is the ideal that we're striving for. Now, once we started, obviously, if you weren't white, male, a landowner, or some combination, let's say cis, whatever, Protestant, like it was really set up for like a very handful of people. Like it was not for everybody, even though the way it was framed was for everybody. And the standard conservative talking point these days is that, well, it didn't start off right, but the idea was right, and as things progress, it's gotten better and better. And whether or not you think that's propaganda or true, or however you want to frame that, we could objectively say over the last 250 years, things have gone from horrible to less horrible. How less horrible is subjective, but it's gotten better. That's it. Is it basically no? So with that framing in mind, looking at the 4th of July, which was a great holiday for folks like me, and then Juneteenth, which gets better for other people, and then later on, where the franchise expands to women and everything, like things get better over time. But it's weird to just say that the 4th of July is important, because it kind of still sucked for everybody else. You know what I mean? Yeah. It didn't actually. That was just the beginning. Like, it's great to mark the beginning in a certain way, but also marking the important milestones of improvement along the way. I mean, that's kind of the whole point. If things were perfect back then, we wouldn't need to worry about making it better. But like, it obviously sucked badly back then. It just got slightly better. And to look at like the arc of improvement, that should be the story, is that things were not good to start, but they've gotten better. And that should be the aspiration of self-improvement. And I guess that's all I'm saying, is that, I mean, actual conservatives are deeply hypocritical about this. So like, I'm not even trying to frame that. I'm just saying is that the dream, even for however progressive you are, should be this idea that things started off badly. You can say they had good intentions or not, but it's gotten better over time, and we need to not lose faith that they will get better and that they will improve, and we should keep working for an improved America. And that's all.
Because you have the acknowledgement of something like Juneteenth.
Yes.
Well, and that's a dark thing to acknowledge. I mean, on one hand, it's
like,
positive.
We can cancel Thanksgiving too while we're at it, and then it'll all be better.
Well, right. Like, but that should be the idea, is that it's a arc of progression. So we should understand that it's progressing because it just fucking sucked to start, but it's been getting better, and we should make that the point.
I just think that's it's extremely. It's more than significant. It's like Juneteenth. Try to get your head around what it must have been like to be the very last people to get the memo.
Yeah.
What must they have felt and thought?
Yeah.
Because many people,
like, wait, what?
Many African Americans that were there did not move when they were told you're free, and they wouldn't leave, and they went, well, free to what?
Yeah.
Freedom of what? We don't know what that is. I remember somebody had written it in a journal. Who was Jackson or whoever it was? Yeah, Jackson. And they were like, we don't understand. They're not moving. He said, well, they're free now. They can do whatever they want. They can stay or go. And they wouldn't leave. And they were just like, the masters of the plantations were like sitting there waiting for them to take off. And they just said, well, okay, what do we do now?
Yeah.
You have no concept of other. They never. Did anybody not understand how restricted they were not allowed to move past X boundary line?
Yeah.
You don't understand. We lived in a tunnel, digging bones for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
And that people would say, I want that moment to be commemorated historically. It shows where people are thinking. They're thinking about the inhumanity and the humanity of moments like that, and that those moments are significant, because where do you see that represented anywhere? Here's the day that your people were set free. What? And you've been with us for 250 years. Chattel slavery was 400 years old by the time the Civil War concluded. 400 years. And here's a memo. Let me read it to you, because I know you can't read. Here, it says you're free. Are you supposed to believe somebody that hands you a memo like that? I want to know exactly. I want to hear every single thing about what happened to the last people to find out that they were no longer slaves. So I know the movie's coming, and I can't wait.
Yes, and there's.
It kills me, breaks my heart. I grew up right there in Catawba, surrounded by KKK. So we were the other N word.
Yeah, there's
we're the BIPOC N word, the ones y'all don't talk about. We were there, we saw it.
There's so much about this you can actually uncover and learn about in Galveston itself. But yes, there's a lot of information and there's a lot of record on just that progression.
I just it's so hard for me to.
Yeah, no, you make an excellent point.
Well, we were part of that too. We were there. My people, my mom's side, were there when the first ships were brought over off of Sea Islands. First slaves were pulled off. We didn't know what they were. We didn't know. We couldn't tell because they were covered in months of feces, so they were blue. Blue. So we have these stories about the blue dog and the black dog. So I mean, watching that from the first time they set foot, and then of course our branch of family is Gull Island, so we have all those sort of stories. Watching that from that to the day that somebody got this message, oh, you're not a slave anymore. I'm not even just imagine. Yeah. I don't think they celebrated. I don't think it was I think they all just stood there and went, "What have you done to us now? Now what have you done to us?" Now they're going to kill us because they think we're going to leave. Great. Let's get now. And doot comes the KKK, and here we go. That fast.
It's funny because Reconstruction. This is why it's funny. You bring up an excellent point because and one of our topics comes up is critical race theory and educating people further about the more darker history of the country. But a lot of the questions that you have is for stuff that we've been trying to learn more about, but also teach, because conventionally the way we've learned about Civil War to Reconstruction is once upon a time, U.S. had slaves, and then we had the Civil War ended, slavery ended, and then we went through this period called Reconstruction. And then at some point, everything went back to normal, except for Jim Crow. And then a little bit later, then Jim Crow was over. That's essentially how we were taught. We were never really went into the details of first what happened, because it wasn't just the KKK came out of nowhere originally. After Juneteenth and after Blacks got the freedom, believe it or not, the first thing they started doing was they started trying to accumulate wealth, and they started trying to run for office. They actually were elected. If you look at the oldest, the very first African Americans who were elected to government, they were elected not too long after the end of the Civil War.
Right.
You'd never heard of that because what had subsequently happened then is a deal was essentially struck with the whole Beverly Hayes compromise.
Mm-hmm.
Basically said, hey, just to keep things steady and to keep another potential civil war from erupting, we're going to let you establish this caste and this hierarchy so you can still feel like the whites are in control, right? And because of that, it essentially undid and put in stasis that progression that was beginning to take place after Civil War, and that progression would not happen again until 1968.
Correct.
Yep.
It was a long process.
Yes.
Yeah.
That progression was a march that lasted 100 years. Sorry, Art.
Yeah.
Art, go ahead.
So having 2 summer holidays, celebrating quote unquote the that people are fussing about. So the duality is important. You think about Thomas Jefferson. This is a guy who on one hand said that all men are created equal, yada yada yada, and on the other said that the black race lacks or is inferior in the endowments of both mind and body, to whites and all that. A guy who fathered 4 children through one of his black slaves, and also, created a framework for, life, liberty, through happiness. It's such an insane contradiction, like, to really look at it. Like, it's a very human thing. Like, that duality, that hypocrisy, like, it all weirdly is very touching, so long as you understand that you're just starting as all of humanity did, from a place of ignorance and darkness and confusion, and over time progressing better and better and better. And we can say that people in that era left the world a little bit better than they found it. And then you get on to the next 100 years, like the Robert E. Lee, portrayed as like this this troubled hero who stood up for his community, and he didn't really believe in slavery, but he did right by his people. Who also was writing letters to the New York Times back then, saying that, essentially to paraphrase, that slavery is good. We're educated in elevating the black race, and this is useful to their instruction, and over time this will raise them up.
White man's burden.
No,
Right.
For
sure.
Absolutely, but like, this is how a lot of this was framed. Is like, it's taught and conceptualized as a way that you ignore the horror of it to put a good spin on it.
The lost cause.
It's absolutely the lost cause.
You're speaking of lost causes, sort of reframing what the South's grievance actually was. And because again, in our generation growing up, well, what the Civil War was really about was really about states' rights.
Right.
Now,
Yes, an economy. Because they didn't see them as humans, so you can't call it about human rights. It never was.
Yeah. Never mind the fact that there's every single secession, every single declaration of secession, which is documented and recorded.
Yes.
That each state that seceded released. And it begins with, because you are trying to end our right
way of life. Yes.
It doesn't even say it, that it is each one, Tennessee, Virginia, Texas, they are each very clear.
Yep.
We are leaving because you want us not to have the ability to own slaves, and you are ultimately going in a direction where the black person is on equal ground as a white person, and we oppose that. Every single declaration of secession is framed in that exact way. There is no gray area. It is specific. You can find each declaration, and the wording is almost perfect.
Right. It's sovereignty and it's economics and it's economic sovereignty. And that was
it doesn't
motive.
But
they don't even use economic sovereignty.
No,
they didn't have those words to use, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
They didn't want the competition. They didn't want the regulation, so they wanted that free market hyper.
No, they wanted to subjugate.
They just wanted they wanted to own human labor. That is exactly
for the purpose of, right, unregulated commerce.
No, again, here's the problem with the unregulated commerce thing. The South, with regard to the cotton industry and all of the produce that the South that the South had produced and exported throughout the country and globally, they had tons of regulations and different things that they had to follow, and they had zero problem with that. Mm-hmm. And again, in each declaration of secession, none of them cited any, we're being too regulated, we're being too this, we're being too that. None of them, it is very clear cut. We want to own people because these people that we own, they are not people, they are cattle. And you shouldn't be putting cattle as equals to us. Every single declaration of secession.
Well, I mean, that's clear. You couldn't, once you had those people like that. Anybody in our history who's ever owned slaves, and there have been, all of them have owned slaves. Mm-hmm. We're absolutely terrified of an uprising.
Well, we had uprising.
A slave owner cannot put slaves.
Yeah, since about.
And he's not going to let a foreigner come and do that because the foreigner must be out of his mind. Clearly, the Northerners didn't understand slavery and the relationship, right? So, yeah, they didn't. They were like, yeah, you know what? We kind of don't like. No, you're not hearing us.
Again, even that's not quite accurate because so. And here's another thing. Another misconception is the North opposed slavery and the South didn't. It's actually a little bit more complicated than that.
Well, it's way more complicated than that. But
yeah,
how do we fit it into a beautiful podcast like this? We have to be a little memey about it. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, essentially in a nutshell is it ran like this. The Democrats had the strongest foothold in the South. At the time, the country was primarily made up of, you had the East Coast, and then the area where Illinois sat along with the Southern corridor, that was basically the frontier. Illinois is the boondocks. Most of the developed part of the country was primarily the East Coast, which, even though the Republican Party at the time was still new, they pretty much had a foothold in that part of the country. But because all of the land of the territories was both the South and the frontier, that was a Democratic stronghold. Mm-hmm. Now, at the time, this stronghold was very pro-slavery. That is why originally the Democratic Party was the party that supported slaves. It wasn't that the Republicans opposed that they wanted equality. It's just that they just felt like rednecks own slaves. We're not rednecks. We don't want slavery simply because we don't want to be associated with rednecks. We have business. We're civilized people. We don't need to have dark people running around our house with chains. We can actually hire people to do work. We're not rednecks. That is how they viewed it. And at the time, the GOP didn't want to. At the time, the GOP didn't want to press the issue of abolishing slavery nationwide. It was just to them as, we don't need this in our backyard. The South can do whatever the hell they want. Then came Lincoln and said, well, look, you can't uphold the Constitution and have slavery at the same time. These things are contradictory. And even then, Lincoln took a good while to evolve to that position.
Yeah.
The only reason and the only reason he managed to be elected president was by sheer will of luck. So the Democratic convention, they could not agree on who should lead their party because rednecks. But anyway, they essentially fractured and picked two candidates, one representing the Deep South and one representing the Midwest. So it completely split the party vote. So because it split the party vote, that's how this then upstart party, now known as the Grand Old Party, managed to win that primary. So it was just it's just the recipe was just perfect so that it enabled to lead to a situation where the institution of slavery would eventually end. But there was never any sort of movement to speak of that was like, hey, we're our ultimate goal is to end slavery. It's just it was more that the way things were going, it just led to the conditions that led for that to happen.
And then there was the fact that
1799. It was a Quaker man who was tremendously influential politically, and who would not let this issue of slavery go. So he petitioned and petitioned and petitioned for decades until we got abolition onto the issue. It was the issue, but it complicated the fact that the South was free market and had much more status, all right, on the global playing field than the North, which was struggling. North was totally dependent on the South. So you had a perfect storm of conditions. But then, a perfect storm of conditions and more than 1 million slaves.
Well, it wasn't that the North was dependent upon the South. It's that the way the original country was framed, it gave landowners more power.
More power, yeah.
Okay, yeah, but all their food, cottons, all these things.
Yeah, but by the time the Civil War happened, the North was an industrial powerhouse exporting goods all over the world. So there wasn't that.
Where was it getting its goods from? It wasn't coming from the North.
It was
coming from South America. It was coming from. You got to understand the United States.
No, I understand it all. I'm just saying that
stolen from Native Americans and etc.
Well, no, I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about the fact that as a merchant enterprise.
Yeah.
The United States had a fairly robust trade economy outside of its domestic production. So yes, the South had a massive production of farming, cotton, things like that.
There was a few other things that they had. Yeah.
Plus, you got to understand, this is the rest of the nation hadn't been frontiered yet. So as far as agriculture, big agriculture, we didn't have the ability to feed the country to the capacity that we can now until way after the Civil War. It didn't get till Spanish-American War. Mm-hmm. After the Louisiana Purchase was fully settled, and we had made it all the way to California, that we became a big ag powerhouse.
Well,
for the most
majority of food staples, et cetera, were coming to the North from the South, including other things that they produced in their mills. So whatever was feeding industry, all right, it was coming sort of in a mutual agreement.
Not steel.
South's first complaint was that the North stopped buying a lot of. They started ending deals and ending trade agreements and purchasing things elsewhere, and
because they were able to get it cheaper elsewhere. But I think we're getting way into the weeds on this. We've been talking about this history for a good 15 minutes or so now. And I don't want to end it, but this is something way beyond the scope. But I do think
you got to get to the weeds and when you talk about this. There's nothing easy. It's no easy way.
Anyway, if you guys are about done, all I was saying with Thomas Jefferson is that duality that we had with the conceptualization of freedom versus the actualization of freedom. You have the 4th of July and Juneteenth are a great way to track that arc as far as where we started, which was an idea that wasn't realized at all. And then Juneteenth is just an expression of that progression. That's it. That's it. For America, it's important to us. We all have our myths. We all have our beliefs. We all have our, aspirations. But to look at it as, hey, starting off at an imperfect beginning that hopes big, and then having another holiday that says, hey, we dreamt big and we started making it. We started off really, really down here, and then we made it up here. This is an important waypoint in us being down here, but working our way up here. That's all I'm saying, is that having that arc super important, because if we make that part of our national aspiration, that frames and contextualizes things for people, and it gives us a common understanding of what we should all be hoping for in the present. And we have our own base. We're starting off now, where in 200 years, people look back on us and be like, wow, those guys were pretty ignorant. This is pretty rare. But they worked their way up, and they didn't give up, and they kept trying. And, even though their accomplishments by our standards suck, But for them, it was improvement. And as long as we can keep the improvement going, that's sometimes that's just got to be enough. So we need to not give up on improvement.
It's kind of where I am. Yep.
On that note, I personally would like to see more holidays celebrating the betterment of the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Make the passage of the Civil Rights Act a holiday. Make the passage of the 19th Amendment a holiday. Make the passage of the everything, right? So that we have this be like, hey, like as Art saying, shit was really, really bad. It was horrendous. We're gonna celebrate not being as bad. And then make, like Art was saying, make that the arc of history.
That's the only weird thing about like 4th of July. You get like these conservative outlets. You get like Hodge twins with like their 1776 shirts, and like, in 1776, like you guys would not have been celebrating.
Yeah.
You guys would have worked in the fields. Like it's fucked up to try to pin everything on that, and it's like that should really be like that's when everything started. Like it's not. Those weren't good times. It really wasn't good times for anybody but a very, very small slice of the population. Yeah. And to frame that as like to look back on, it's kind of fucked up. So that's all.
I always think about that random part of Family Guy when someone's like, "Hey, I invented the time machine and we can go back to the 1950s. You want to go with me and check it out?" Nah, and then the black guy's like, "Nah, I'm cool." It's like, "Nah, I'm cool."
We have been streaming for about 2 hours or so, but I think it would be remiss if we didn't talk about why that history and CRT kind of ties into Juneteenth a little bit. So I don't like saying this, but I was proven.
What?
Was proven. What's that?
130.
Go ahead.
Oh, who's?
No, it's probably yeah.
So one of the things that I have noticed over the course of the last almost year or so now is that there's been these viral conservative videos of seemingly regular people at school board meetings, at various other different things talking about, critical race theory and being very upset that you're teaching white people to hate themselves and to hate white people, and that there's shitting people into oppressor and oppressed classes and all this other stuff. But but the media has finally caught on to something that us online kids have known for at least 6 months, that this is all an effort in order to shove everything conservatives don't like into the Marxist hellhole that they have created and make everybody turn against everything that is quote unquote woke. So what's going on with that? What's going on in these school board meetings? What does that say about the point that we are now? And does this kind of thing make Juneteenth not just celebrating it important, but maybe turn it into something more than maybe it was going in?
All right.
That's a lot of questions.
I treat the two somewhat separate, but I do somewhat agree with a post that you had made that basically said like one bright spot about Juneteenth being officiated as a holiday is you have to learn about it. You have to learn about it. It is, why is this you at least have to understand why is this a holiday? At least that much. Whether or not that it matters to you, to me, in the grand scheme of things, is ultimately irrelevant. Right. Just as long as its fact of historic record is taught. That's all I really care about.
Well, this is a funny thing about like CRT in general. If you study the power dynamics between everybody, and this is what really trips the circuit breakers for a lot of conservatives, is that if you actually stop and think about that, you're like, hey, like this country we have, how did we get it? Didn't we like have to kill like many millions of people to take over all this land? Like once you start thinking about the history of this country and how the past influences the present, it unravels a lot of mystique and myth about what conservatives believe in general. So it's terrifying for them that we would have to actually put these like convenient myths aside and actually try to unravel some of these things. Say, hey, based off of where we are now, like, how did we get here? And how does that influence the future? These are a lot of conversations that they do not want to have, and they frame it in terms of like blaming people or this and that. But they bring that up because they understand that if you start looking at things, there's some guilt involved, and there's a lot of fucked up stuff that happens to get us to where we are today. And no matter how you want to pretend that happened, pretense will get you far enough so long as you don't look at it. But if you actually examine it and think about it, there's a lot of things that really don't add up in the conservative mystique as far as American life. So this is why they push back about all the time about how they're blaming white people, ancestors did, but us and stuff. And it's an important conversation to have and to push them out of their comfort zone and make them have these conversations to understand that even though you might have a good day, the reason you have a good day is because you made sure, your ancestors made sure somebody else had it bad. And that is important to understand, even if you want to say, we'll be better going forward, we'll fix it, we'll do, however you want to deal with that. But you need to come to terms with it. And you need to not let these comfortable myths that we, were taught growing up and that, our parents were taught and all that. It's important to reject that and to, actually take a step back and take an honest look at it and critically consider the past and its effect on the present. And it's just funny that the way that they frame it immediately goes to, oh, you're just trying to blame white people. Well, not per se, but like we're just trying to how did all these white people get out of Europe and get to here and make it all the way to California and everywhere in between, and we have all this land? Like, how did this happen? Like, is nobody going to question this? Like, is this, we're just going to accept this? Yes. That's all. I just think that it's going to provoke a lot of discomfort, but if it provokes any discomfort at all, it needs to provoke a lot more.
And the interesting thing is, I feel like that, like the sort of unsettling of it, the uncomfort, I guess you'd call it, is really a phenomenon that's here because every other nation in Europe is figured out how to acknowledge this and then grow from it. I mean, including Japan, like,
it depends.
Well, so okay, notwithstanding a couple people from the Abe party, I know where you're getting at. for the most part, like they get it. Like, look, we were some pillaging, warmongering motherfuckers. We get it. But eventually we progress past that to civility and to prosperity and an understanding that, look, at some point you can't be a warring, pillaging, raping motherfucker no more. You actually have to have a love and respect for your common man.
Let's hope.
Germany managed to make this reconciliation. I mean, they preserved all of the horrible shit that they did, during World War II. They don't sugarcoat any of it, but at the same time, they still tease that, and they are still able to grow and progress as a society. England is somewhat of that. I still think they need a little bit more work, but they getting there. Brexit uncovered a couple issues, but they are boys, so we gotta go easy on them.
I had a gal from Germany who used to work for me, and somebody gave her a hard time about the German history. They made some joke about the 30s and 40s, whatever. And she goes, "Yeah, you Americans aren't so innocent. You guys just never got caught." That's like, like that's kind of it. Like Germany doesn't make sense. But like you guys did the same thing. You just didn't get caught.
Jesus.
Was the question actually on critical race theory and?
So, I guess the proper question would be is why, not why, but how are conservatives going about taking everything they dislike and shoving it into critical theory and Marxist indoctrination of children in schools? Because the liberals have not. Go ahead.
Conservatives are shoving everything into critical race theory.
I guess
Yeah,
I have
pretty
to.
much.
I have to teach and design curriculum for critical race theory. So I haven't said nothing too much about this. But what do you mean conservatives are shoving everything into it?
They are framing the argument in such a way that a lot of people that are prone to agree with conservative ideology believe that critical race theory is this all-encompassing anti-American, anti-Western ideal thing,
leftist Marxism.
like leftist Marxism way, in order to destroy everything that is good about America and blame white people for everything.
Teach little kids hate America.
Because white
Yeah.
kids were complaining for over more than a decade. That when they went to school, they were being taught American history and came out feeling guilty, and it went on for much more than a decade. These are documented complaints of this. So eventually, it ends up like this. Yeah. So as instructors, we have to deal with that. The impact of how this information is delivered.
Yeah.
It's no coincidence that Juneteenth and anti-critical race theory shit all starts at it's all the same time. So
But my response to that is
you know,
you saying they felt guilt for
it came out feeling guilty and ashamed.
But I mean, but how long have they been feeling that guilt? Is because you mentioned how long they've been feeling that guilt. How long was it?
Feeling it.
But for how long is the because you mentioned for a decade, right?
So I mean, for more than a decade, complaints were being registered by white kids that they were the course curriculum, with accurate histories and surrounding systemic racism resulted in them feeling guilty and ashamed.
Right.
So,
and my response,
this is finally a very slow burn. The people pushing the anti-CRT finally picked up this as a cause. A little late in the game, if you ask me. It's like the horse is already bolted and you close the gate.
Yeah,
that's all.
Playing off of something that was a thing that was really happening, but and they timed it. So
well, go ahead, Travis.
I was going to say you bring up a point, and my response to that point is if I was to sit in a room for somebody who brought that up, I would say, okay, so then imagine about 30 years of being taught history in a way that's like, well, people who look like you haven't really contributed much to this country. People that look like me have, and that's and that would be my response to that. And then as far as the feeling guilty, I mean that's the same reason why lost cause the lost cause narrative of the Civil War became a thing in the South, because for whatever reason they just didn't want to come to grips with the fact that we went to war for a terrible reason. We got our asses kicked, and we need to. but we need to sort of preserve this sort of. Well, it wasn't as bad as you make it out to be. It was this antebellum, Southern hospitality. We was all on a porch watching people, making
on a poach with a pole,
and then all of that. It was. The facade, it wasn't really about the fact that we were rolling. It was that we had our Southern way of life and everything was peaceful, and we just wanted to keep things that way. Didn't want to let us do that. It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
What's they gotta change?
That's my
Basically, I gave you everything you own.
Right.
Like straight up.
I think, and I'm gonna go ahead and call it after I make this final point. To that guilt comment, that feeling of guilt, I think it needs to be stated that you're not. This is the whole thing of original sin and everything, and I don't like about that either. But you're not guilty for things you didn't do. You shouldn't be feeling shamed for things that you didn't do, and this applies to everybody, right? It doesn't matter, like everybody throughout all of history. Like you shouldn't feel these things. You should be aware of them and learn from them, so you don't repeat these mistakes or these atrocities. But you shouldn't feel guilty about it, and that was where proper education comes into it.
And as comedian,
no, there was no forethought put into following up with students about encountering this for the first time, because
Yeah.
you're 6 or 7 when you hear about Black History Month and find out that your black friends once were in shackles. It's devastating. I mean, if you
No,
don't,
I can agree with that.
if you're not ready,
Mm.
then you could end up with a whole new, and I believe that's where all this 868 new white supremacy groups come from. You're going to end up with a lot of really resentful, fragile
That's true.
egos. And as far as I can tell, in counter extremism, which I was just sitting with today, yeah, that's it. So the conservative rearing the South will rise again, picking up that lost cause, is disturbing and just sickening. I think I'm like, oh, could you put that flag down now before you die on that hill again?
Mm-hmm.
It did work for you well last time, so now they think they have a chance. That attacking critical race theory in schools, it has to do with the justice system and discrimination. So, I mean, that's where it comes from. This was Bell's legal theory, Crenshaw's legal theory. These were lawyers, these were attorneys, all right?
Mm-hmm.
So to skip that would be the same as let's not talk about the justice system.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God! I say the lease is up. All y'all have to go back. Get out. Land back. You had your shot. We're canceling Canada. That's it. That's it. You're gonna have to go to Australia. They'll love you.
I will say it would have been
its own
cool.
problems.
It would have been cool if 1812 we did land Canada. That would have been cool. I do have to.
They would have to deal with my ancestors, and you wouldn't have. You know, you would have been. I don't think this is such a good idea.
I don't know. Canadian rednecks are pretty fun. I will say.
No.
Letterkenny is hilarious. Everybody needs to go watch that show.
Yeah. I don't know. Canadian rednecks are amazing. I finally going up to Winnipeg. I finally met some, and they were a hoot. They were a hoot.
Well,
ask them how many murdered and missing women and Indigenous girls were in their neighborhood when we went up there, because I met them too.
Yeah,
they were not a hoot. But they were funny. I was laughing my ass off all the way back from the rifle range.
Yeah, Canada.
And the funerals. Yeah, I was laughing my ass off all the way back. They're fucking.
Which, if you guys ever get the chance, if you ever find yourself in Winnipeg, they have the Museum of Human Rights, I believe we call it, and it's really cool. You learn a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, everybody, I'm sad to say, though, that we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. It is always a pleasure to interact with our community. Please sure to go ahead and check us out on our next episode, which will be happening next Monday, probably at 8 p.m. as well, because I am going to be out of town again this week, going to the beach with my wife. It's going to be a lovely time.
Enjoy.
Everybody, please sure to go and follow Universal Discourse over at Twitch. She makes great content, great debates, always has interesting interviews and things going on. Go ahead and check them out over at Twitch. And Travis, again, thank you so much for joining us. It is a pleasure to have you on every single time you're on. It's a great time. You should do this more often if you can. So you're more than welcome to come back.
Oh, yeah.
As always,
True.
I'm very happy to meet you. I didn't know you. I enjoy it. I enjoy sitting with you. That's interesting. And Art, suspenders or not, it's always a pleasure.
You got to get a
I'm making you beignets.
You have to get a pair.
I'll be only wearing suspenders next time.
Do it.
Okay.
That's legal on Twitch now, so you can go for it. Yeah, I mean, if you can't see the waist down, right? But
just no nips. They're anti-nips, the bastard. You should get an OnlyFans. It would be hot.
Yep. Y'all subscribe. Don't play.
Speaking of subscribing, go ahead and smash that like button for the algorithms.
Smash it.
Link, subscribe, share us with your friends, and as always, keep your head up through the political storm.
Bye.